What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Coach Mike Dub, here with another edition of Lockdown Defense Sports Studio. As always, we're picking up things during the off season, throwing a whole bunch of different, topics at you. Of course, if you've been paying attention, you've seen a lot of movement going on with teams picking up in free agency. Draft is drawing near. Pro days picking up. They already wrapped up the combine. So that means that a lot of teams have already positioned themselves to kind of solidify either who it is they want to pick or at least put themselves in position so that they don't come out a loser come draft day in the end of April. So that being said, we're going to jump right into the NFC and AFC West to talk about how these teams have been faring so far in free agency and after the first initial moves and the first initial wave before the draft. We're going to go over what are these teams' biggest things that they need to address, before they head into camp and before they can say that they've kind of made all the moves that they're going to make for their respective rosters. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. Like I said before, we're going to be talking about the AFC West and the NFC West, both divisions. Very interesting, of course. My other colleagues in the Lockdown Sports Studio, they'll tell you all about the AFC West, both the Chiefs and the Chargers. They pay a lot of attention to them. I know we got a lot of supporters, a lot of listeners, a lot of people out there, viewers that are fans of these teams as well. So feel free to add your comments as to, what you think these teams need to do to kind of say that free agency and say that their offseason was a success. But first and foremost, we're going to start out with the AFC West, jumping into biggest roster needs. So let's start with the Chargers. A lot of talk has been talking about the Chargers, especially early on in free agency. They didn't make a lot of moves, but I think that that wasn't a bad thing because once again we talked about how they did last year, which was pretty solid season in Harbaugh's first year. They had a pretty solid core that they wanted to stick with, so they really didn't have to shake things up too much. But coming into the free agency, they did lose a few guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They looked like they were trying to revamp, drop some dead weight. Looking at the defensive back position, a lot of guys that started this time last year or were looked at as being starters this time last year, they moved on, or I should say that the Chargers moved on from them. But that being said, they did bring in some other guys, bring back some other guys that they felt like could contribute for them on the back end. Elijah Molden at defensive back, and of course Khalil Mack, the All-Star edge, he's brought back. So they addressed some of the things that they lost and some of the things that they wanted to tighten up. But overall, I think the biggest additions that they made in the offseason was addressing their offensive line and their running back situation. Of course, we know Harbaugh. We know what he likes to do. They're doubling down on the run game. They're going to double down on that. That's the identity that they want to build. So that being said, I think their biggest needs going into the second half of free agency and then also going into the NFL draft is just going to be solidifying some extra weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, at wide receiver, they struck gold. With the rookie wide receiver who had a big year last year. They went out. They tried to get Mike Williams, bring him back. Mike Williams is a guy that obviously can stretch the field. And then of course they have some wide receivers on their team that they're bringing back as well. But the consistency, I don't know if it's there yet. So I think that if there's another guy available that they can tighten up, another weapon that they can add for Herbert. Once again, we know they're going to try to run the ball. But of course, that tight end position, something that Harbaugh likes to do, something that running the ball is going to open that up. So, possibly they might be somebody that they target in the draft. Two really good first round tight ends come to mind. So maybe that may be the direction that the Chargers go in. But I think their offensive weapons, that's the biggest needs that I see for them that they need to address. Other than that, I think their roster is positioned to, run it back next year and compete for another playoff spot. And speaking of running it back next year, of course, we want to talk about the perennial AFC West champion for the last few years. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're the cream of the crop as far as the AFC goes, but they're coming off of a tough Super Bowl loss. And I think everybody who watched that Super Bowl will tell you that their biggest need was on the offensive side of the ball, offensive line specifically, protecting that blind side of Patrick Mahomes and making sure that they have an answer for them. They brought in a guy in the offseason I think he's a placeholder. I'm not sure if he's going to be the answer, the long-term answer. So I think that they're still looking for what they can do to solidify that entire left side of their offensive line. It's going to be interesting because now we know it's a copycat league, and we saw that the Eagles had a blueprint for how you want to beat the Chiefs and how you want to beat them convincingly. And I think their offensive line is going to see a lot of pressure, a lot of different varied looks, especially coming from that blind side of Patrick Mahomes. So they're definitely going to have to find an answer for them there. And then also replacing what they lost at the safety position in Eric Reed. They're going to have to find somebody to come in and replace that. They have a young secondary. Obviously they're going to be tested, especially with an offense as potent as Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and all the things they're going to do. You're going to have teams that are going to be in positions where they're going to have to attack. They're going to have to play from behind sometimes, throw the football. So you're going to want to be solidified in the defensive backfield. So look for them to add once again what they lost at the safety position and in the secondary. Next, we're going to move on to the Broncos. The Broncos actually are, like I mentioned before, one of the teams that I've loved their moves that they've made this offseason. They were a surprise for a lot of people in the regular season, with the play of Bo Nix, and also their offensive line really stepped up and played well. I think for that reason, that kind of made them a little bit more flexible at the running back position. Their star running back last year has moved on to the Dallas Cowboys. They didn't feel the need to sign him. Part of the reason is because I think they had a running back by committee, and I think that they're looking probably to do that again this year. But that's a position that they can look to add to. Of course, the more weapons that they give Bo Nix, the better. But that's a team, like I said, they don't have a lot of holes to fill because they addressed a lot of their defensive side of the ball during free agency, bringing in guys like Greenlaw, bringing in guys like Hufanga. And then also they also address some needs at tight end, bringing in Ingram. So they really don't have a lot to take care of in the second half of free agency and in the draft. But I am looking for them to possibly solidify that running back position. I've heard some names bounced around for them that they might consider. But I actually think that based on their position in the draft, they may be able to get one of those edge rushers from Texas A&M. And I'm purposely not dropping names for who I think that some people may be looking at in the draft, because it's just a teaser. We have a full mock draft coming that we're going to do on the Lockdown Defense Sports Studio. So I don't want to put too many spoilers out there, but possibly they may be looking at getting a defensive lineman, a potential edge rusher in the draft. I think that could be a big help for them. And last but not least, the Raiders. Obviously making big waves in the offseason, bringing in Geno Smith. He's reunited with Pete Carroll, which means that they're going to have to find somebody for Geno to throw to. It's few and far between on the offensive side of the ball, aside, of course, from Brock Bowers, who had an amazing year last year. But teams are going to be focusing in on that. Of course, the sophomore year is always a little bit tougher because teams have film on it. They notice tendencies. Brock Bowers is that whole offense. So with him being the feature, they're going to have to find other guys to contribute on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to have to find a playmaker at wide receiver, maybe somebody that they look at the draft, playmaker at running back. Once again, maybe somebody that they look at the draft. A lot of people are floating the name of, the running back that from Boise State, Ashton Jeanty. A lot of people are floating that name around. I actually think that they still could go Shador in the draft, depending on how the first few picks shake out. Why do I feel that way? I don't think that Geno is the long-term answer for them. We know how the Raiders feel about Shador. We also know, how the front office feels about it. Geno's coming up on a contract year. I believe this is last year of his contract. So maybe that may be something that they may look at. Once again, I don't think the Raiders are in a position to win immediately. I don't think that they're a playoff team right now. So, for that reason and many more, I think that they may be looking long-term with this pick and may not, get somebody that can come in and contribute right now. They may be able to be flexible and take somebody like Shador. But I say all that to say, they need some more weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They got to solidify that before they can move forward and be a perennial threat, not only in the AFC West, but in the AFC in general. So now we're going to move on to the NFC side of the ball. Of course, this is a interesting conference, very competitive, an interesting division, I should say, very competitive. We saw a lot from these teams last year, a lot of movement in the offseason as well. So starting off with the San Francisco 49ers, I think that they are in rebuild mode. They're going to have to go in and they got to replace all of what they lost. Talking about on that defensive side of the ball, Greenlaw is a huge loss for them. They're going to have to replace him with another linebacker that can step up. That's really the heartbeat of their defense is their front seven. So obviously you got Bosa up there, but aside from Bosa, they're going to have to give some depth on there. They're going to have to get some depth on the defensive line, and then also tighten up so the person who's going to be playing, next to Fred Warner as well. So replacing what they lost specifically in that front seven, that's I think that's something that they're going to address in the draft. But I think that that's their biggest glaring need right now that I see. As for the Rams, offensive line and cornerback, once again, protecting that backside of Matthew Stafford. He's getting up there in age, so you want to make sure that he's standing upright as much as possible. They added a weapon in Devontae Adams, so in order for you to get him the ball, which he's going to want, of course, in order for you to get the ball to Puka, you're going to have to be able to be upright. So making sure that they can get Stafford some time. Timing is everything in that offense. So they're probably looking to plug some pieces on that offensive line, and then cornerback as well. I think they're in a position where in the draft they'll probably take the best player available at either O-line or DB. Based on their position, I think that the best player available will probably be a defensive back or corner at that position in the draft. There's a guy that I have in mind that I think will be a very good fit for him. I talked about him previously in my combine talk with Maxwell Harrison. I can see him being available and maybe being a good fit for the Rams, but that's something that they want to address. As for the Seahawks, we talked about them, early in the offseason, adding in Cooper Kupp. Obviously, Sam Darnold is their guy behind center now, so they're going to want to make sure, once again, like we talked about, with any team having a quarterback, you keep him upright and you give him time to do something. So solidifying that offensive line, that tackle position, making sure that Darnold's going to have time, making sure that he's able to spread the ball around, making sure that he stays healthy as well. Their season is going to be hinging upon how healthy their quarterback is. So that's going to be a key thing that they want to address. And then their linebacker position, their defense was really the heartbeat of their team last year. I think that obviously their secondary is one that's always good in Seattle. Same this year. Their D-line, they had a young D-line that stepped up big with Murphy, who had a good season. I think he's going to have a breakout year. So you just want to solidify that second level in the linebacker position. And I think that they'll be, cooking with oil at that point. And then finally, last but not least, the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals actually are moving in the right direction. They're a team that a lot of people haven't paid a lot of attention to. Slowly but surely, they're starting to build things around Kyler Murray, build things around that unit down there. Obviously, added Harrison. Probably could look to use a few more weapons. Their offensive line surprisingly was pretty good last year. Kyler Murray is going to have to figure out how not to hold the ball too long, how to stay in the pocket. There's a lot of times that he just goes into, scramble mode and whatever the case is. But obviously McBride being one of his favorite targets, they got some things that they're working with down there. So a lot of their attention is going to have to go to the defensive side of the ball. They addressed their defensive line in free agency, bringing in Hassan Reddick and some other pass rushers. So I think they're going to continue to solidify that unit, and then also in the back end at the cornerback position. So those are things that I can see them addressing. Once they address those things, I think they'll be, in a good position. Once again, their position in the draft, I can see them taking the best corner available, possibly, a Barron from Texas. Will Johnson still be available when they pick? You never know. But I think that's probably what they're going to be targeting. I think once they start to solidify those positions, defensive line, cornerback, specifically the defensive side of the ball, which they've already addressed in free agency. But once they really tighten that up, I think that we'll start to see a much better team than we've seen in the past. So, of course, like I mentioned before, stay tuned to the channel. As we get closer to the draft, you're going to be seeing all types of, material, draft material coming out, mock draft coming up as well. And we want to hear from everybody as well to see what we got right, what we got wrong, who we have our eye on, what team should be targeting who. And, stay tuned for some more good material from the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. So without further ado, enjoy your night. Take care. Talk to you all soon.